It's 4.5 kilometers long, holds 90,000 cubic meters of water. The Canal San Martin in Paris is being dredged for the first time in 15 years.
Deep with the dark and murky waters of rivers and canals lie hidden treasures and ancient artifacts you'd never expect to find. From ancient cities buried for thousands of years to this 200-year-old canal packed full of forbidden treasures and lost species. These are 15 of the most unusual objects found in drained canals. Number 15. Ancient city under Mosul Dam. 3,400 years ago, in the glory days of the Matani Empire, an ancient Iraqi tribe lived in a city known as Zakiku. Their story, buried deep underwater at the Mosul Reservoir on the river Tigris, came to light in May 2022, when the country got hit with an extreme drought that lasted months, forcing the government to drain water from the reservoir to irrigate the crops. As the water levels fell, the ancient city buildings became exposed for the first time in centuries.
Archaeologists are rushing to see the re-emergence of an ancient empire city in Iraq before it goes underwater again.
There were multi-story storage buildings, an industrial complex, and of course a huge fortification, all dating back to between 1550 and 1350 BC. Technically though, this wasn't the first time the city emerged from the waters. In 2018, a team of German and Kurdish archaeologists excavated the site for a while.
Paul, how were the archaeologists? The ancient city has been buried underwater for years.
Before the water levels rose again and the entire structure became submerged underwater again. However, the dry spell that ravaged the region in 2022 created the perfect condition for the city to make an appearance one more time. The walls, made from sun-dried mud brick, were found in pristine condition, at least for a city that old, all thanks to the protective coating of rubble that wrapped around the city when it was destroyed by an earthquake in 1350 BC. Ancient ruins aren't the only things you can find in a drained river or canal though. Sometimes you might just stumble on a bunch of cars. Number 14. Hiram Reservoir Graveyard. Ever heard of the graveyard for cars? Welcome to the Hiram Reservoir in Utah, a body of water filled with dozens of car carcasses.
The old frames and stuff like that are more visible right now, but they start showing up as soon as the water starts going down.
You probably can't see them now, but back in 2021, when the water levels went lower than usual, several old car frames started sticking out of the reservoir, littering the entire body of water. But how did they get there? That story takes us back to the 1950s, when city officials were trying to strengthen the reservoir's shoreline. Apparently, someone suggested that they throw a bunch of cars into the North Shore to help stabilize the bank, and surprisingly, it worked. Of course, these cars were already out of service, so instead of throwing them away, why not put them to good use, right?
Well, my understanding is that, I don't know the exact day, but back in the 50s, they placed a lot of those old cars on the North Shore to help stabilize that bank.
Well, as good as that idea may sound, it's actually very bad for the environment. Apart from polluting the waters, these cars also pose great danger for fishing boats and other vessels that may travel through the area. Because of this, the government has been trying to clean up the mess in recent times, with around 8 cars removed in 2013 alone.
Every year you can actually see cars. There's a few cars that never quite made it into the reservoir.
However, there are 2 problems with this plan. 1, moving these cars is crazy expensive. We're talking $10 million to move 80 cars. And 2, remember the major reason the cars were dumped there in the first place. Well, once you take away the car pile, the shoreline could be severely damaged. So until there's a permanent solution to this shoreline problem, the graveyard might remain the same for another decade. However, Utah isn't the only place where you can find cars and other valuables buried underwater. Even the UK has its own fair share of canal junk. Number 13. Treasures of the Root Canal in the UK. Dozens of shopping trolleys, countless bikes, and hundreds of tires. These are just a few of the things found in several canals across the UK. The year was 2014, when the Canal and River Trust decided to drain these canals. What they found was beyond shocking. Thousands of plastic bags, several car batteries, gas bottles, all drenched in sludge. During a cleanup at the Salmon Lane Lock in Tower Hamlets in East London, though, volunteers made a rather dangerous discovery. A hand grenade from the Second World War, which still had its pin in it, meaning it could still explode and cause serious injuries to everyone present. Thankfully, the police soon arrived to carry out a controlled explosion without anyone getting hurt. This was just one of the many weird objects uncovered along the 2,000-mile waterways. There were also 14 safes, all opened, found in the River Lee under London's North Circular Road, not to mention the laughing gas bottles buried deep within the Paddington arm of the Grand Union Canal in London, which wasn't surprising since the area has more than a few rave sites around. The weirdest find, however, would be the 2013 Mercedes A-Class found in one northern canal. Apparently, its story is tied to an expensive marital dispute gone wrong, although it's not clear whether any murders were involved in this one. The Regent's Canal also gave up its fair share of treasures. 2 pizza delivery bikes all complete with soggy pizzas. Wonder how they got to the bottom of the canal. Inside the Leeds and Liverpool Canal, volunteers found the remains of a 16-foot python. And much like everyone else in the canal, no one knows how it got there. Speaking of unexplained finds, check out what happens when authorities drained this 200-year-old canal. Number 12. Draining of Canal Saint-Martin. In January 2016, a curious crowd of Parisians gathered on the arched footbridges that crisscross the Canal Saint-Martin. Everyone knows it's the favorite hipster hangout spot, so it wasn't shocking when workers started pulling out some oddities out of the drained canal. At first glance, the 200-year-old canal looked like a giant dustbin. From the mountains of old wine bottles to the countless office chairs, bikes, rolled-up carpets, wheelie suitcases and street signs, the muddy pit was a trash collector's wet dream. The authorities themselves know how bad the canal is, which is why it gets drained every 10 to 15 years, so workers can clear up the heaped-up rubbish buried underneath. The project lasted 3 months, and in the process they found 1 gun, which was handed to the police, a bunch of bikes, all kinds of chairs, 1 motorbike, shopping caddies, public dustbins, a fire extinguisher, umbrellas, and a children's doll's pushchair. As weird as all that may sound though, it's nothing compared to that one time someone found actual voodoo at the bottom of the Hertford Union Canal. Number 11. Hertford Union Canal. Stretching for 1 mile through East London, the Hertford Union Canal may look like a pretty uninteresting stretch of water. That was until 2021, when the locks were finally opened and the entire canal was drained for the first time in 20 years. The idea was to carry out some vital repair work on the inner walls. But while that was going on, a group of volunteers also got to work cleaning up the garbage that had accumulated within the past 2 decades. That was when things got interesting. Inside this city landmark, they found tires, a lot of them, rusty bicycles, and some traffic cones. Nothing inside the canal looked unusual until one volunteer named Nicola White found a disembodied Elsa doll's head with an extreme goth makeover and screws for earrings. At first, it looked like someone was practicing voodoo on the doll, but then it could have belonged to a kid who just loved putting makeup on dolls, right? It didn't end there though, because just down the canal, volunteers also found another princess doll naked with clumps of hair missing. Coincidence? Maybe or maybe not. We'll probably never know. But this is definitely one of the most unusual things ever found in a drained canal, unless you count the village that resurfaced after spending 2,000 years underwater. Number 10. Roman Ghost Village. The Lima River in northwest Spain is home to a reservoir built to serve the city in troubled times. What nobody realized was that an ancient town was lurking right beneath the waves. Dated back to around 75 AD, the ruins in question apparently belonged to a Roman military camp named Aquis Querquenis. Experts believe that the ancient military base was built during the glory days of the Roman Empire some 2,000 years ago. To put that into perspective, imagine a whole new generation finding Area 57 underwater thousands of years into the future. Drone footage showed how incredible the whole site was after laying untouched for centuries. As a military base, this small village housed up to 600 soldiers, but was later abandoned by the army after it was flooded by the river. Inside the base, there's a temple, a couple of army barracks, thermal baths, and a hospital. If the city hadn't experienced a massive drought, we probably wouldn't know a structure this amazing laid below the surface. Speaking of ancient relics, how about one from over 100 million years ago? Number 9. Dinosaur tracks in Texas. After Texas got hit by a severe drought in 2022, a bunch of rivers started drying up, revealing the secrets they'd been hiding for many, many years. At the Dinosaur Valley State Park in northwest Texas, archaeologists found multiple dinosaur tracks belonging to the Acrocanthosaurus. It had been there for over 100 million years, but it's not the oldest they've ever found. Under the completely dried-up Paluxy River, archaeologists found prints from the Acrocanthosaurus dinosaur.
Yes, that was very soft mud, and don't forget, these creatures weighed about 20 tons.
According to their theory, the 15-foot, 7-ton creature once dominated the area some 113 million years ago. In addition to these ones, about 140 tracks were found in total, which means the place was probably brimming with dinosaurs in prehistoric times. The Acrocanthosaurus wasn't the only dinosaur who lived there, though. Prints from the 66-foot Sauroposeidon were also found. And since experts claim the Acrocanthosaurus preyed on the Sauroposeidon, it explains why their prints are found together. Number 8. Shipwrecks in the Danube. Remember how the Hiram Reservoir is known as the car graveyard? Well, the river Danube might just be the ship graveyard. After a blistering summer drought drastically reduced the water levels in September 2024, the Serbian town of Pravoho became a huge spectacle, with 4 German vessels emerging from the waters. Historians believe this set of vessels were from before 1950, which means they were likely used by the Nazis. However, this isn't even the first time ships have cropped up in the river Danube. Back in 2022, dozens of scattered ships operated by the Black Sea Fleet of Nazi Germany suddenly appeared near Prahovo in 2022. But then, the main question still remains. How did they get there? To understand that, we'll have to travel back to the dark days of the Second World War. You see, between 1941 and 1945, Nazi Germany and its allies occupied the Western Balkans, where they ruled with an iron fist while fighting communist partisan guerrillas. Everything changed when the Soviet Union invaded and sent German forces back to their borders. In the heat of this retreat, the Nazi troops traveled through the West, with Germany engaging in some scuffles from along the Danube in September 1944. In order to slow down the Red Army, the Nazis decided to sink their ships to clog the river. This was a double-edged sword, as it also prevented the vessels from falling into the hands of the Soviet Union. Today, these ships continue to pose a threat to the route, and with over 200 ships buried within this formidable waters, the possibility of completely clearing them out seems quite slim. However, in 2022, an initiative financed by the European Investment Bank and Western Balkans Investment Framework pulled together $30 million to oversee a salvage operation to remove all the vessels. A couple of them have been removed since then, but there's still a whole lot of work to do. If Nazi ships lurking underwater aren't strange enough, then this Buddha temple buried underwater might just take the cake. Number 7. The Wat Nong Bua Yai Buddha Temple, August 2019, Lopburi, Thailand. Thousands of tourists flocked to a long-lost Buddhist temple that recently emerged out of a dam reservoir after water levels dropped to record lows. The drought was heavy that year, sending the reservoir to about 3% of its usual capacity. While this was detrimental to the people, crops and livestock nearby, it created the perfect condition for the Wat Nong Bua Yai, a Buddhist temple long buried under the dam for 20 straight years, to make an appearance. To the locals, it was a miracle seeing an ancient temple rising from dry ground. Despite the stench of dead fish and other marine life, hundreds of people visited the headless 13 feet tall Buddha statue, adorning it with flowers and laying their prayers at its feet. The dam, with a capacity of 960 million cubic meters, was built to irrigate more than 1.3 million acres of farmland in 4 provinces. But with the water level dropping that low, only 3,000 acres could be irrigated in the single province of Lopburi. But there was a time when the dam hadn't been built, and the Buddha statue stood tall within the temple. Located at the center of now-lost community, the temple was used to conduct rituals, festivities, and educational activities, besides serving as a playground and recreational area. What's more amazing than a massive Buddha rising from the waters? How about a Roman-era bridge buried for thousands of years? Number 6. Ancient Piers of Nero's Bridge. Between the years 54 and 68 AD, Emperor Nero ruled the Roman Empire with wisdom and grace. Just kidding, he was a horrible leader, remembered for his horrible policies that almost destroyed Roman civilization. But he loved to build things and named them after himself. He spent a bunch of money from the empire's treasury on a huge structure known as the Domus Aurea, or the Golden Palace. However, one of his most memorable landmarks remains the Pons Neronianus, or Nero's Bridge, buried deep under the Tiber River for thousands of years. After a record-level drought hit the river in 2022, the stone remains of the bridge became exposed for the first time in a very long time. But despite the name clearly etched on its body, experts still couldn't verify whether it was the real Nero's bridge or not. Historians believe that Nero had extensive gardens and properties in the area of the Vatican, which the bridge would have given easy access to. But since the waters have returned to normal levels, the bridge has vanished once again, leaving behind a trail of broken history and mysteries that may never be solved. Speaking of ancient mysteries, remember when a strange tunnel suddenly appeared in the Euphrates? But before we get into all of that, check out our subscribers pick for today. When authorities drained this 200-year-old canal, what they found at the bottom was extraordinary. Deep at the bottom of the canal, they found fishes huddled together in groups, surrounded by trash and other regular objects you'd find in a canal. The picture captured at the scene shows the volunteers trying to pack the fish into bowls once the water levels dropped. But how do these aquatic animals manage to survive in such dark and disgusting waters? And is it even healthy to feed on fish found in these canals? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Now, let's get back to the rest of the video. Number 5. Mysterious tunnel in the Euphrates. Western Asia is home to many rivers, from the mighty Tigris to the intimidating Mekong River. But the Euphrates is both the longest and the most historically significant of them all, which was why the entire region came to a standstill when the river suddenly dried up in June 2023. It was a shocking occurrence of biblical proportions, but the main headline revolved around a mysterious ancient tunnel that appeared at the bottom of the dried-up river. With a perfect building structure, neatly arranged and still intact to this day, this tunnel represented a lost time in history, before the mighty Euphrates covered the entire landscape. But who built this fascinating structure? Was it the ancient people? Or does the tunnel really lead to a mysterious dungeon where angels are imprisoned, as the locals claim? According to the Book of Revelations, the Euphrates would serve a very vital purpose at the end of days. From within its depths, 4 angels would emerge at God's command to serve the purpose for which they'd been locked away in the Euphrates for thousands of years, bringing judgment to the world and killing a third of mankind. The prophecy aside though, the sturdiness of the structure itself was a complete marvel for engineers, who couldn't imagine how a structure of that size could have survived under the waters for so long. If you thought this was amazing, wait till you see this mysterious object that recently emerged from Rupchand Lake. Number 4. The mystery of Rupchand Lake. Located at an altitude of about 5,029 meters in the Indian state of Uttarakhand, Rupchand is a glacial lake that has been sitting there for thousands of years. But when the ice melted in 1942, thousands of human skeletons suddenly appeared within the waters, and nobody was able to figure out how they got there. Initially, experts believed the remains were actually Japanese soldiers who sneaked into the area during the way and unfortunately perished in the rough terrain. Since this was during the Second World War, the British government sent a team of investigators to determine if the bodies belonged to the enemy. But after examining the skeleton, they discovered the bodies aren't as fresh as they would be if they were Japanese soldiers. It wasn't until 2004 before the truth would eventually come out. After a team of European and Indian scientists conducted DNA testing on the skeletons, they separated the group into 2 distinct physical categories. One was shorter, while the other was significantly taller. Carbon dating also placed the time of death at around 850 AD, which means they couldn't possibly be Japanese soldiers. As for the cause of death, the investigators also found cracks on the back of their skulls, indicating that they all died from a fatal blow to the back of their head by round objects about the size of cricket balls. Since they didn't have any injuries in any other part of their bodies, it means the force likely came from above. Historians believe the people were probably on a pilgrimage journey to Nada Devi when they got stuck in the middle of a hailstorm. With nowhere to hide, these 600 unlucky pilgrims all lost their lives that day, their bodies buried under the thick ice. Number 3. Matani Empire, long-lost city. Established in 1475 BC, the Matani Empire was one of the most powerful empires of its time. The strangest part, though, is that very few people know about this long-lost world power. Before it got completely destroyed in 1260 BC, its influence spread far and wide. But since there's virtually no written record documenting its existence, the Matani Empire's history has faded into the dark shadows of time. Kemune, the ancient city at the heart of its civilization, was destroyed by an earthquake many years ago. But after the reservoir of the Mosul Dam in Iraq experienced low water levels in 2013, the ruins of the city saw the light of day one more time. However, it wasn't until the autumn of 2018 before the site would finally be excavated by a team of German and Kurdish archaeologists, led by Ivana Pulgiz from the University of Tübingen. Within what remained of the palace, they found 10 Mitanni-era tablets, as well as a few more artifacts from this lost time. Then again, in 2022, extremely low waters revealed the ruins again, leading to the discovery of 100 cuneiform tablets from the early Middle Assyrian period. Speaking of ancient artifacts, imagine finding a once-in-a-lifetime sword just lying around in your backyard. Number 2. Ancient sword. Saga Vanacek was out swimming in the Vidöstern Lake just outside her parents' home in Småland, Sweden, when she stepped on something strange.
Kändes väldigt coolt och det kändes lite.
The water levels had dropped thanks to a record drought of 2018, allowing the 8-year-old to explore the unidentified parts of the lake. Lifting the handle up, she curiously examined the object before deciding to take it home to show her father. Something about the object looked quite extraordinary, but the father couldn't put his finger on it, so he decided to hand it over to the local archaeologists, who identified the find as an ancient sword from the 5th or 6th century AD. What are the odds of finding such an invaluable artifact in the middle of a lake? How did it get there? And who did it belong to? All these questions remain unanswered, but at least the scientists were able to classify it as a pre-Viking artifact. The sword was then presented to the Jönköping's Lana Museum, where it will eventually be displayed for everyone to see. It's not clear whether the young girl got a reward for the discovery or not. Ancient artifacts are pretty cool and all, but have you ever seen an ancient church rising from deep within the waters? Number 1. Old Mexican Church. Since 1996, the Temple Santiago, also known as the Temple of Quechula, has been buried under 100 feet of water. But after the water levels of the Nezahualcóyotl Reservoir in Chiapas state dropped by 80 feet, it finally saw the light of day one more time, leaving the residents in awe. Built by the Spanish colonists in 1564, the church is about 183 feet long and 42 feet wide, with a bell tower that rises 48 feet above the ground. The reason the people built such a huge tower was because of the great population surge that hit the area. But after the plague decimated the region between 1773 and 1776, what was supposed to be a population center suddenly became deserted. Sadly, the massive church never even had a dedicated priest, only receiving visits from those working in Tecpatan. This wasn't the first time the church would appear above water. In 2002, when the water levels experienced a significant drop, visitors were even able to walk inside the church and pray. It was a time of celebration for the residents, who traveled to the site to eat, hang out, do business, and do some processions around the church. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.